let's see. Participants. Yes, here we go. Amazing. What's up, Brian?
What's up, folks?
Hey, good to see you.
Jonathan.
Hello.
Ronan, Desiree.
Where is everyone calling in from today?
Hawaii.
Hawaii.
Ooh,
Nice.
is that Jonathan?
Frankfurt.
Yeah,
Nice.
add some geographic diversity to the crew.
Yeah, we got Frankfurt, Desiree. That's good. That's good separation. What's the distance?
Definitely.
Dear
yeah.
Bing, what is the distance between Hawaii and Frankfurt? Yeah. See if that gets
A
us.
very long plane ride.
No joke. No joke.
I'll make it into a triangle. I'm in Merida, in the Yucatan right now.
Ooh.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm Ireland. Little Ireland.
All right.
Damn. Well, I'm in
What
Los
we- what-
Angeles.
Yeah, what we're discovering is no one is anywhere near each other. We are all spread apart.
I've got Tom, I've got Brooklyn represented in the background here.
I see that.
That was actually designed by this guy named Cameron Mall. And it's a funny story because he designed this poster. It's pretty wild. So this thing is like each little shape, might be tough to see, is a letter. So like,
Oh, wow.
basically like he used Illustrator to kind of like design each letter, rotate it, place it, make a whole bridge out of it. So he prints up like 30,000 of these and he sends them out and he gets an email from someone and they're like, you spelled Brooklyn wrong. And it became this whole thing because it was a whole Kickstarter. He had never noticed it. And it's just one of those words that just looks right, but it's wrong. And it became this sort of like mishap, piece of art that was
And there's probably no way you would have pulled it off the wall to talk to us and tell that story if it didn't have the misspelling, right? It would just have been like stuck there. We wouldn't have talked about it. Yeah.
I'll straighten it later.
Yeah.
Like Ted Lasso's Believe.
Yeah. Just bam. Yeah. All right, welcome everyone. We've got a nice little crew. So today is going to be only 30 minutes because I got a client meeting. So everybody, I have to bounce about halfway through. But I thought we could jump in. Do you want to share the screen on the Figma, Nate? So where did we leave off? Okay, so in the last week, we have done. We built a website, we got a landing page up, we got the email newsletter sorted, we got a logo, we got this little thing developing here. Nate, you can walk us through that in a sec. And we've also got some ideas about curriculum and kind of the actual kind of cadence and format of the course. So I think would love to talk about the cadence and format and get some feedback on that today. I just put a week 4 thing in there, Nate. Is it not synced yet? Yeah, there we go.
It is. All right.
So we can talk through that, yeah, we'll just jam. Nate, why don't you kick us off with the sexy stuff? Let's talk about the logo.
Yeah. So Tom and I just really quickly kind of breezed through this because Tom reaches out and is like, "Hey, we need an email header," and really just to kind of walk through like, maybe this is useful. If it's not, I apologize, but we were kind of using this font called Inter for our typography on the website. And it's just typically a good starting place. And so we started using this for some of the different kind of logo treatments. I took some liberties to like cut off the T, the other side of the T, so that the T and the H kind of fit together a little bit more closely. Kind of like brings everything in a little bit more horizontally. And so we started playing around with this first, the idea kind of being, how can we make this a little bit playful? And so we started with some cursors kind of coming in, some different treatments around the eye here, kind of getting a little bit retro here. And then we started thinking about like, how can we use the cursors, and Figma is really great for like moving parts around and collaborating. And so we kind of came up with this idea of like, someone just moved the dot from the eye down below. And so you see the two cursors kind of arguing a little bit. It kind of like works in a condensed way for email headers and maybe a YouTube channel artwork. So we did something like that over here. When I think about branding, it's like, well, if we ever don't have enough space for that stuff, we can just kind of yank them out and just use the letters. And then I created a quick logo mark here, which I don't know if I love yet. I just had to put something on YouTube. And so, when you're creating logo marks from a longer word, you're trying to communicate that really simply. And so playing with the T and the F a little bit here is sort of where I went with it. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at from a branding perspective. All of this took, maybe an hour and a half of work, just kind of whipping through this stuff. And I find a lot of fun. It brings a lot of like motivation to a project when you can kind of see this. And so you're kind of getting yourself amped up about where it's going. And so I think from a standpoint of like, building things out, making them feel a little bit kind of having a vibe, I think really helps with keeping us motivated to work on this. So
yeah, you use the word "we" a lot there, Nate, but this is pretty much all you because you're the real designer in the room.
Well,
I just gave some feedback, but I think much like we started this project by building a landing page because that's a great kind of working backwards of how do we talk about the course, who is it for, what's included, right? The kind of positioning that is helpful to kind of work backwards from. It gives you that thing to, if you can get that right, then you can start to work backwards from there and make sure everything fits together. In the same way, I think a logo or branding, like visual identity stuff, is useful because it forces you to figure out like what kind of tone are we trying to set? Like, what are we trying to be serious? Are we trying to be playful? Are we trying to be professional? Are we trying to be creative? Right, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think it was helpful to kind of look through these, scan through these, and kind of arrive at that little playful-esque. And I think that actually that playfulness theme is going to end up being pretty deeply embedded throughout this course. Like, at least personally, I don't know how you feel about this, Nate, but I feel like this kind of like Figma is a creative canvas. It's this open thing. So like having a place where we can just riff and have fun. So I think that playful element is gonna continue. Even though like this is the first time I've seen that the logo mark. Even the fact that it's like almost backwards is kind of like a fun, like backwards upside down. Is kind of a fun little theme. Sam, were you waving? Do you want to say something? You want to chime in?
Right. Did you happen to share the Figma link, Tom?
I did not yet, but I can jump in and do that.
There's that. So for everybody following along, you can just jump into Figma here and actually check out what we're going to kind of go through today on week 4, but you can see past weeks as well if this is your first time here.
Yeah, so I think like that continuing that playful theme. This was kind of this is the rough draft of the kind of course outline that we're developing right now, and I think what Nate and I talked about was really trying to structure the whole course around activities and projects. So really not thinking about it as like instruction, as like we're telling you what to do or how to do things, but really just there's a thing that we're trying to make during the course, or like several things you're trying to make during the course, and obviously you're going to end up learning a bunch of stuff about Figma in service of that, but having this kind of project-based approach. And so we kind of had this, week 1's going to be about the basics. Sure, like you got to learn like just 101 stuff about Figma, like where everything is, what the buttons mean, how frames work, some of this kind of stuff that is just like table stakes to kind of get the lay of the land, get your feet under you, feel comfortable. And we figured like even coming out of week 1, you could do something that is universally useful that everyone can make, like for example a LinkedIn banner, right? So like everyone has a LinkedIn page, everyone's got that little banner at the top of the page, come away, everyone can design a LinkedIn banner, right? It gives you a little sense of accomplishment. It's not too heavy, it's very bounded in terms of constraints. Doesn't need to be overly complicated, but gives you that sense of like, oh, I made something cool. Figma is already useful to me. And then week 2, we were kind of moving into like what we were kind of, these are all just placeholder kind of language, but working visually. So this is very much about working with visuals in a kind of professional context, including topics like giving feedback to a designer who's shared a Figma file, or creating a mock-up using a Figma file, working with screenshots of websites, that kind of thing. And there's a very much an open question here that I want to come back to in a second and open the floor to is, how much is everyone here working with websites? Like I work with websites all day long, but like, is that a thing that everyone resonates with? Is that useful? So that's week 2, working visually. Week 3 is kind of thinking visually. So this is more about creating presentations, running workshops, creating diagrams for blog posts or diagrams for presentations. So this is kind of less about the strict kind of like, Figma as design tool and more about Figma as thinking tool. And then week 4, we haven't quite figured out yet, but I think week 4 is going to be kind of a full-on project week, like go make something now that you've got a lot of the tools, and we'll be there through week 4. We're even thinking like maybe every day in week 4 we have office hours open so that you can kind of you can dip in as much as you want. Maybe you come in every day as you're building a presentation or creating some mock-ups or just to get feedback on something. And that's kind of, so that was kind of the overall structure. But I'll stop talking there. Just kind of, what resonates here, what doesn't resonate. Do people work with websites? Anything missing?
Yeah, feel free to come off mute and something.
Or dive into the Figma file and react in there as well. It's also
Exactly. Lucid chart. Have you used that, Tom?
I haven't, but I know what it is. It's kind of like a diagram maker, right? Like it's good for flowcharts and things. Is that right, Andrew?
It's Lucid chart. Yeah, it's for like flow charts, for process documentation, for just like visualizing stuff. I mean, you can drop screenshots in there and use it for workshops. You can do like Kanban stuff, project stuff. It's just a lot more flexible than like PowerPoint or Google Slides, and it's a lot more flexible than like a traditional project management tool.
Could you do me a giant favor? Is there anything you made with Lucidchart that you could just take a screenshot or dump in the Figma file?
Yeah, for sure.
You got an example?
There's also something called they also have a new tool called Lucid Spark, which I haven't used too much, but I think maybe it's like probably a little bit closer to Figma. Yeah, I think it's more for like designing websites and web pages and things like that. But yeah, I'll go into my account. I'm just like in between lunch and walking around, so.
That would be great. Amazing.
Cool.
I have another one as well, but maybe this is also in Style Guide, but what about things like where you create like a mood board or a vision board that then gets translated into some kind of like booklet form? Sometimes, I don't know if you guys use that in strategy practice, but I use that quite often, and it's not really a slide deck, it's not really a style guide, it's like something in between with a very visual aspect as well.
Do you have like an example, like what, like you say, like an actual printed version? Is that what you're talking about?
It could be printed theoretically. So the idea comes from, a lot of big organizations, they like to have the option of printing things. They sometimes don't do it nowadays, but just having that format and then maybe making a booklet out of it or some kind of like blueprintish thing, a mix between a style guide and a mood board, something like that, with maybe some vision principles as well. I don't know if that's mixed in there as well already. So
one of the things that we talked about actually was, so Nate runs a whole course called Approachable Design, which is great. You should go sign up for it if that's your thing. And that's like a whole course around finding your personal style, right? So like choosing some colors and typography, visual aesthetic, and so on. I know there was a kind of a question that Nate and I were wrestling with of like how much of that lives in this course. How much should we ask people at the start of the course to pick some fonts and some colors to kind of use in their work? Like, does that feel daunting and overwhelming to people, or is that useful because it gets you thinking that way? Like, yeah, I don't know the answer to those things.
To your point, though, I do that all the time. I make those types of boards. They're kind of a mix between style, mood, vibe, documentation, and so yeah, that's a great question, whether that's something we include here or not, but that's I use Figma for that quite a bit.
Yeah, I just dropped in an example of what I use Lucidchart for. It's an information architecture of a site, but just below it you can kind of see where I was maybe is I was thinking. So the thinking was going on below, and then the actual information architecture was there. But
This is great.
Figma obviously is not only could you do the IA, you could design it as well within it.
Yeah, this is great. I've done things very similar to this in Figma, and actually Figma is not always a great tool for this kind of creating a bunch of elements and then having them like create I don't know what you call them, the connected lines between them. There must be a fancy name for that. But yeah, it's not always great for that. I don't think. I think FigJam is actually maybe better at that kind of stuff. But yeah, this is a good example.
Yeah, I think the only thing that it lacks is like there are plugins for this though, where you can create boxes and everything will kind of start to connect automatically. And that's what, Tom, I think you're saying is like FigJam and some other tools are better for just creating boxes. Even like, what's that one that starts with a W? Whimsical is really nice for that too. You're right. I do this stuff in Figma just so I can kind of like keep improving the resolution from sitemap to wireframe to high fidelity.
I think like Lucid is just easy and Whimsical is easy. I think Figma, for me, I bounced in. I was like, oh, intimidated. I'm gone. So,
but I think what you show here, which I think is super interesting, is the thinking down below. Like that's why I start so many things in Figma, is because I know that I just have a canvas to put stuff next to the other stuff, right? So it's like if I find a screenshot that's relevant, or I find even just a passage of text that's relevant, I can just grab it and dump it in there, and then out of that mess I can assemble something later. But it just becomes a perfect kind of container for a project and a set of ideas, set of thinking. Is there anyone here, Desiree, we mentioned the kind of the brand style guide kind of booklet, let's call it quotation marks booklet. Is there anyone else who doesn't work with websites? Like anyone else who's like where a kind of website feedback session is not something that they would be interested in or relevant for? Everyone's pretty website-y. I mean, I feel like that's a safe bet, but I just wanted to kind of validate that a little bit. Any other like if there was something that you could come out of this course with, like an asset, like a designed something, what would you want to see?
I just dropped in. I tried to like add it to the Figma, but that's a screenshot. So I'm a sales consultant, and so it's like kind of a flow chart or the steps. And the example is like if you're selling to the Fortune 500 and there's a new executive that comes on board, you should like start educating them about your solution in the first 90 days, because that's when they're creating their like roadmap or their plans or their vision. So
walk me through this. This is
so it's like helping. I'm a sales consultant, so I'll help like sales teams to like create playbooks and like improve their processes. And a lot of sales teams, they use LinkedIn to find their leads. And this is like kind of abstracted, but using LinkedIn filters to like find new executives who joined a Fortune 500 company or whoever you're trying to sell to in the last 90 days. And then getting it exported, enriching the data with their contact details, getting it uploaded to your CRM, and then running some sales plays of like educating them about your solutions to like get on their like to like get some mind share, and maybe not try to hard sell them, but just say like, hey, I know you're like firming up your budget, your plans for the next year. Would love to like give you a briefing about our widget, talk about that.
So tell me about this diagram specifically. Is this contained in a slide deck? Is this just in your own head? Do you share this with people and walk them through it? Do you like run a training workshop
I was just kind of like
around
messing around with it. It's like I kind of know this stuff just because like I know that that's what you're supposed to do. But I think one of the reasons I did this was there's a lot of complexity between LinkedIn and Salesforce. LinkedIn got bought for $26 billion by Microsoft. And so LinkedIn and Salesforce don't really talk to each other. And so 90% of like companies or people like don't connect the dots here to like harmonized, like to tie them together. And so it's like a handful of extra steps, but then like if you're actually able to execute this, you could do really well with it. So it's just like trying to like explain the processes where it says like, okay, here's the what you need to do, enriched and updated the messaging, and then the how is like you need to put it in a spreadsheet, you need to like get the details and get it into CRM. So it's just like trying to like break it down.
I mean, I think this is a great example of something that could be formalized into a slide for a presentation or into a set of training, even a series of slides as a training thing that I think Figma could easily help with.
Yeah, because you can see it's pretty rough, like, but like it's just like
no, it gets the thinking out there. It does the visual layout, which I think is the key, like the fundamental element here of like there is a process thing going on, right?
Yeah, and I like that. Like I've tried to like do stuff like this in like a regular slide, like a PowerPoint slide, and it's just like it's kind of brutal. Like it doesn't allow you to like share enough detail per se. So
right.
And it kind of feels like you're filtering out your thoughts by the time they go into the presentation, and it's lost so much of that traction. I can totally hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
Anyone have any other like objects that they'd love to come out of this course with?
I haven't thought about this, but it just came to mind. I see sometimes people that are very like visually inclined on Twitter having like, I'm thinking like visualized value, for instance, or creating assets like that for oneself.
Yep. Yeah, I think that goes back a little bit to that personal style, personal mood board. I think that there's a lot of overlap between those visualized value type things and presentation diagrams. There's a lot of like shared kind of ideas of like you have a thing that you're trying to communicate. How do you lay it out? How do you make it clean, and so on.
And Tom, can I ask you a question? I don't know if you've heard of Excalidraw. I saw Ryan Law on Animals. He was like, I make it in Excalidraw. That's my rough thing. That's like writing, and then I bring it into Figma. I suppose doing something like that, or do you say you don't need Excalidraw? You can riff out the gate in Figma.
Well, I still use Excalidraw actually. So the SEO MBA branding, which is the course that I run, has evolved a little bit. But at the beginning, it was quite hand drawn. I wanted kind of sketchy elements to it, and Excalidraw by default makes everything look a little sketchy. Which again, I'm sure you can do in Figma, but you might need some plugins or might need some libraries to kind of start from. So I actually used Excalidraw a bunch. Here you can see actually. Here, I'm just going to take a screenshot. This is my. This is all the shit that I made in Excalidraw for the SEO MBA. So you can see these are all, a lot of these diagrams either ended up as assets in emails that I'd send out, or they would become versions of things that got polished in Figma. So they kind of like did some thinking here and then polished it in Figma. These days I mostly start in Figma. I think also because I'm more comfortable in Figma now. I find it a bit easier. Excalidraw is like very, very simple and minimal. There's really there's no layers. There's nothing complicated going on, which is a blessing and a curse. But yeah.
I dropped something in the chat. There's this guy Dan Roam. He writes a bunch of books, and he wrote a book called Pop-Up Pitch, and it's like how to design an amazing story PowerPoint presentation in 2 hours. And like the first hour is you get a sheet of paper and you just start sketching stuff out, and like you get the ideas. And as opposed to like opening up a spreadsheet, opening up a PowerPoint and trying to like get the creativity into the PowerPoint just doesn't work. But yeah, I've been using this to like design presentations for consulting, and it's been fun.
That's great. I've used the Andy Raskin kind of greatest sales deck ever.
Yeah,
as well.
Quora, yeah.
Yeah, it's like kind of starting point. But
yeah, so something like this is just being able to like tell stories and I'm not a designer at all. Hopefully I'm a creative thinker, but But like what I've noticed with designers is like you have all these ideas and then they like take away like 90% of it and they just leave like the simple essence of it and it works really well. I don't know how to do that. If that makes sense.
Well, I think so. I mean, there is something great actually here about once you start to get comfortable in Figma using like creating a little design library. So like you're starting with the same fonts and you have the colors kind of like one click away, maybe even using components for things, elements that you commonly reuse. You start like, once you have those scaffolding bits down, you can start to make things very, very quickly, right? You're never starting from scratch. It's kind of like, great, boom, 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 I've got 12 slides, boom, 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 right, titles are in the right place, great. You know, it's kind of, gives you that scaffolding to kind of reuse. Ben, can you talk me about this Canopio Club thing a little bit? Like this is pretty cool looking, but tell us a bit more.
Sure. Yeah. I use this tool like it. I think there's a lot of overlap with what you're doing, and like a lot of the things I saw on your slide about making a mood board or a presentation. That's what I use this tool a lot for. And this prioritizes just getting the content out, and it's not a design tool, right? It's for concepts and making connections and making boxes. And I've thought about like taking things that I sort out with this tool and maybe polishing it in Figma, because it does have more flexibility and like design elements to make like a more either polished presentation or notes. But yeah, I just find it really interesting, like the overlap that there is. And I tend to stick with Canopio first, I guess, one, because I'm not that adept in Figma. And also it's just, Figma has a lot more power. And I think with that flexibility comes some friction when you're just trying to get ideas down in a visual and spatial way.
This Canopio page, is this something that you would want to kind of turn into a blog post or a published kind of object in any way? Like, or is this really just genuinely for your own usage?
The specific one, yeah, it's something I would publish. I mean, I've shared with others who, this is like notes around a book that I'm reading. And so I've shared it with coworkers. But it's mainly personal notes, but it could turn into a presentation. It could turn into a blog post for sure. And I have used, I mean, added links to Canopio or screenshots from it in a post setting. And I've definitely used it for presentations as well.
That's great. This is great. I love seeing the real examples here, everybody. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, this is really wonderful. Yeah, Desiree, I think the interactive documents, when you say interactive documents, do you have a different way of saying that?
So I know what you mean with prototype, and it probably is connected to that in some way, but if I sometimes have the impression that, just to give an example, that you're working on something and then you want to hand it off to, say, the client or a collaborator, then you actually have to create a file, be that an HTTP, I think is possible in Figma. So you share that link or something so that you can build interaction into it. So it's not all static, because I think a lot, especially in strategy, I feel there's a lot of possibility here to make some things move and like show up or down, or so that's what I mean with interactive. And how do you then actually share that? Not only create it, but how do you pass it on, and how can it then be used? Does that make it more clear with interactive?
Yeah, it does. There's a lot in there that's really interesting too.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think there's something about like the best version of a presentation can be an interactive Figma file, because you could do all kinds of things with it, right? Nate, you were just showing me the other day, your kind of horizontal, like it's like a slide, and it has like an element that you can scroll inside the slide, which is like, again, just stuff you can't really do. You can't do in Google Docs. Like you can probably do some of this in Keynote if you really go to town, but Figma is just a great tool for some of that stuff. And it doesn't have to just be slides, right? It can be website mocks or whatever, yeah.
or inciting if you're going into data research and really setting up. And so you can really, your information design can go from top layer really deep, deep, deep. I mean, you can do that in theoretically Keynote, but that's really, I mean, that's going to be a lot of work with all those layers. But I feel like Figma can really do that. But then how do I pass that on? And then what is the compatibility of the person that then receives it? I know it's a very specific question, but I feel like sometimes that's one of the things. It's like a little detail that could really impede a project in the end.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah. That's great. I have to bounce, I'm afraid. I'm talking of doing strategy work. I have to go do a client meeting. But I don't know if you guys want to stay on or whatever. But yeah, I'm going to leave you in Nate's hands to wrap up.
No, I think that's great. I think we should probably cut this short. And
okay.
This was amazing feedback, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. And
yeah, and if anyone has any other examples, now that you've seen a little bit of this kind of inspiration, anything else visual that you're currently making, or find examples that you would want to be able to make, send it to us. Both our DMs are open.
I like telling
drop
stories.
It in the Figma. Yeah,
just telling stories is cool. Like personal, professional. Like I don't want to just do consulting stuff. You know, like telling random fun stories.
Yep.
So,
cool. Yeah, Figma for fun. That's the mission.
Fun.
All right. Thanks everyone.
We'll see you later.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.